Welcome to the State Secrets Podcast. I'm your host, Cipher Brief CEO and publisher, Suzanne Kelly. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Ukrainians have used every resource available to fight back. From aid packages and weapon systems acquired from Western allies, to mobilizing every sector of society to bring innovation to the fight, Ukraine has stayed alive largely because of its adaptations of technology and its ingenuity on the battlefield. As part of a special delegation that visited Kyiv last month, led by former CIA Director General David Petraeus, the Cipher Brief met Senior Chief Warrant Officer Joey Gagnard, who retired from the U.S. Special Operations community earlier this year. As part of that same delegation, Gagnard's unique take on where Ukraine is today when it comes to its use and development of war technologies like unmanned systems provided some ground truth about where it may be headed. I asked Joey to tell us a little more about his own areas of expertise in the special operations community before diving right in to what he sees as the real ground truth when it comes to just how far Ukraine's tech can take it in this war.
So myself, I served nearly 3 decades in the U.S. Army. The first half of that was in the conventional forces, and the second half of that was in the special operations community. Started my deployments early in the Iraq War. Got I think 2 year-long deployments in the conventional force, and then when I moved into the special operations community, I started doing small team and individual work, and got a tremendous amount of experience in about 15 or 20 different countries. Again, that small team or singleton sort of concept, and really learned a tremendous amount about foreign policy. Towards the end of my career, I had an opportunity to take advantage of an educational program that General Petraeus and a couple of others had sponsored under a new fellowship, and attended Yale for a global affairs degree at the Jackson School at Yale. So I had that under my belt as well, and that really promoted a tremendous interest in foreign policy and sort of world events that paired nicely with my military experience that I'd had up to that point.
Yeah, and a strong focus on technology, I think, too, Joey, which I find so fascinating. And let me just ask you, you wrote a piece recently in the Cipher Brief that I thought was excellent because it really framed up where Ukraine is today when it comes to technology. Now, the Cipher Brief has made 7 trips to Ukraine in the last 3 years. And we have seen a massive change from day one when all of us were glued to sort of the television, seeing what in the world was Russia actually doing, dropping paratroopers into the capital and the outskirts of the capital and killing civilians. Like, it was shocking here. And I think people forget that 3 years later in the war, but how they were able to really adapt and their use of technology was able to keep them in the fight as they were waiting for aid to come in or waiting for weapon systems to keep their cities safe from some of the missiles and the drones that were being used against them. Here we are, fast forward 3 years later, though, Joey, and a lot of those technical innovations, while we're seeing them in the battle space, a lot of the drones, the unmanned systems in particular, it's been amazing what they've been able to do with the sort of MacGyvering of adding on certain capabilities that were needed. But as you wrote really well, I think, in your piece, this is still very much a game of cat and mouse. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Sure, absolutely. So I too was watching, very closely as the Russians crossed the border again in 2022. The special operations community was wondering sort of what the policy would be and how we would respond. Frankly, we were all hoping to be a little bit more involved than what we were. Ultimately through my retirement, which was early in 2025. And we watched the technological race, the technology sort of arms race happening very closely. It started off with javelins. We had the U.S. had given the Ukrainians javelins, which was a decisive military advantage early on. We all watched as the Ukrainians decimated tank columns entering into marching on Kyiv. And we thought that was going to be sort of it. They moved into drones, using drones for force protection, for spotting, for artillery and different things. And that was the first sort of, real leap in drone usage that we saw happening in Ukraine. And then since then, Russia has seen exactly what's happening. And it's sort of been like that cat and mouse game that you talked about. The Ukrainians iterate on technology, the Russians respond, or vice versa. And in doing that, they're getting a tremendous leap forward in drone technology that the U.S. is just sort of watching from over the horizon. Now, that's not to say that the U.S. isn't learning from that. I think we are learning and we're adapting. I think I point out some of that in my article. But really what we're seeing is, just we can't iterate at the speed that Ukraine is iterating. They have a couple of, I hate to call them advantages because war is unfortunate. But in terms of technological innovation, they have two things going for them that's really pushing that forward. Number one is that they have electromagnetic interference, or the electronic warfare jamming that is very difficult to turn on and test against inside the United States just on a routine basis. It's very difficult to turn that stuff on. It's very dangerous. You could bring airliners down. You could block emergency communications. And the second is they have a forward line right there. So the pace of innovation, where they can iterate multiple times per day, they can bring something to the front line. They can test it, see how it works in combat, bring it back to a warehouse, fix it, have it out the next day, or the next week, something like that. It would take the United States months to do that without a combat situation. And so we really are seeing the Ukrainians make exponential leaps and bounds in terms of technology. The Russians too, frankly. But they still, as I think I pointed out in my article, they still don't. They built this in a vacuum. They built this thinking that they knew exactly what right looked like, and in many ways, it's incredible what they've established and what they continue to build. But they're missing. What they're missing is the expertise that I think the West could offer to them if we were standing there shoulder to shoulder with them, fighting and showing how we conduct combat operations. And those are the things that I really try to pull out in my article. It's one thing to pick up a field manual and read how operations are done. If you did the military decision-making process and you read the manual on that, you'd have a pretty good understanding of what that is. But if you had someone standing there next to you, doing it with you, you'd see exactly how it moves, the pace at which it moves, the decisiveness, how experienced combat leaders sort of do that stuff. And I think the same thing is true with technology. While the Ukrainians built some amazing technology that works, it serves all of the requirements for the battlefield commander that's using that technology, they don't quite understand the system of systems that I was trying to talk about. Unity of command is one of our key tenets for warfare. The ability of the commander to really drive all of his assets across the battlefield. That's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. That's the kinetic forces that are actually going to conduct finish operations and destroy enemy equipment and personnel. The commander should be able to choreograph all of those things across the entire battlefront to achieve his decisive effect. The effects that the strategy to drive forward the strategy. That's the element that I think the Ukrainians are missing in all this. I think the Russians are too, frankly.
So let me ask you, Joey, I'm going to pause for 1 second because I do want people to be able to read that column, and just remind them, if you want to go read it, just Google Joey Gagnard, Gagnard, and the Cipher Brief, and it'll pop right up for you. And then also, Joey, I've been posting on my LinkedIn account, as you know, some sort of behind the scene images from that trip. As much as I was able to post, there were some meetings that we had that I was not able to post from. But you can find those on my LinkedIn page and Suzanne Kelly. But Joey, one of the things I felt like from the briefings that we had that was really interesting to me was that there's become now this sort of no man's zone along the border. And that is because technology has sort of taken over the fight in those areas, using the drones, using the jamming techniques. I mean, how quickly these technologies are being innovated on and advanced and adjusted on both sides was a little bit staggering to me. You talk about the ability to sort of get control over all parts of the battle space. How much more complicated is that when you now have drones that are tracking the movements of every individual person along the border and then sending out drones to kill them?
It's incredibly complex. The first person view drone teams that are probably the closest to the fight, and the line infantrymen that are sort of holding the line are absolutely pinned down on a daily basis because of the ubiquitous technology that's out there and that both sides are employing. That jamming technology that I talked about that is really everywhere along the forward line is really holding things down. What I've heard is that as soon as everyone is monitoring that jamming, and as soon as there's a break in the jamming, then both sides flood that zone where there's no electromagnetic interference with drones and different technologies to try to get at the other side. The thing about that, just imagine being the other side and understanding you're the guy that switched off the electromagnetic interference. You're the guy that turned that jammer off. The drones are going to flood that zone and they're going to be hunting for you. So, I mean, just think about being in that environment. I don't think the United States has seen that exact type of combat environment or that deadly scenario, in in a long time. There were times during the war on terror when we were absolutely in precarious situations, but nothing quite like that, where someone is absolutely locked down inside of a bunker, cannot leave, or else they risk death because they know they can hear the enemy drones. They can see them on their sensing technology. They know that they're hovering above their positions or they're in close proximity to their positions. Those guys are absolutely nailed down. Now, there's more technology that's out there to defeat those to defeat the electronic warfare and stuff. There's fiber guided drones and that sort of stuff that are basically unjammable, and they're coming up with sort of kinetic manual defeat mechanisms for those sorts of drones. And the thing that really terrifies me most about that is not the being pinned down in your foxhole of the difficulties of operating in that environment. The thing that worries the most is the implications for future warfare. Russia is learning from this. Ukraine is learning from this. China is watching this fight closely. If we think that we're going to go to, if there's a potential for conflict with any one of these people, Russia and China, namely, then we should also be learning from this. What we are doing, the United States, is learning over the horizon. So I think we are learning some, but we're not learning the same lessons that, or as quickly as the Russians and Chinese are learning. And they're iterating on their technology very quickly to harden themselves for the next conflict. Whereas, we are to a lesser degree. I think the United States is starting to catch up and starting to realize. I'm seeing some of the doctrine come out of the military and stuff that acknowledges the drone threat and the need to get on board with that. But it needs to happen much more quickly than what it currently is in the United States.
Joey, I think you touched exactly on what is the point of criticality in this war and in the future wars that you mentioned, which is something that we heard during multiple meetings that we had while we were in Ukraine with you, was we have to do it faster. Faster, faster, faster. Speed is the advantage that you have on your side. And if you don't take full advantage of speed, whether it's innovating, whether it's adapting the technologies you're using or the strategies or the tactics, then you're going to lose. It's the one thing that cannot be sacrificed. So when you mention that China and Russia are acting on these things faster, it kind of scares the living daylights out of me. What's the answer?
I mean, I think there's a role for the U.S. Military to play inside of Ukraine. As a former soldier, we advocated very heavily to try to get more involved. We're always pushing the envelope. Soldiers, people join the military to go to war. I believe we understand that that's a risk whenever we join the military. Many people join in order to do that. We want to do things that we can't do in the civilian sector, and war being sort of central to that one of those things. We pushed very heavily to go to war. I understand the administration's trepidation about the previous administration's trepidation and probably the current administration too, about Russia being a nuclear armed adversary, and what are the implications if Russia decides to go nuclear. I just don't believe that I've seen our intelligence community a lot of times sort of overestimate our adversaries. I think that's the case with Russia too. I think our calculus is all wrong with Russia. I think that one of the best things that we could have done that would have prevented the current arms race from sort of happening is we could have helped Ukraine out very quickly. We could have gone in and decimated any Russians coming across the border. That would have, we wouldn't have the escalation that's going on right now, and Ukraine would be in a much better place. So I think strength through force. I think our security would have been the world security would have been much better right now if we'd gone in and shown strength early on. It is a terrifying prospect that now we have this situation going on because we didn't show strength and military dominance early on. We could have prevented a lot of this from happening, in my opinion. We didn't, so we're here now. I hope that we can catch on very quickly, and that the access that we have to advanced technology and the intelligence and the tech acumen that we have inside the United States will fill that gap.
Joey, let me ask you. I think that the one thing about the nuclear saber rattling on behalf of Russia that's always bothered me, if you sort of give in to that, is where does it end? Do they get what they want in Ukraine because of overwhelming firepower against a population that really isn't trained or equipped to defend itself properly? Do they next go to Poland and do they rattle that same nuclear saber and say, by the way, don't stop us, we're a nuclear power, whether they're part of NATO or not? I mean, the logic just doesn't fit for me. But let me ask you, if we're talking about the future, President Trump has been pushing pretty hard. Still really difficult to know whether he's going to make any progress on bringing an end to this war, but he's been pushing pretty hard so far, not getting a whole lot of cooperation from Russian President Vladimir Putin. If there were some kind of deal, how important would it be for a U.S. presence to be on the ground to make sure, because the fighting won't stop. It will go gray zone, in my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but that's what I think after the trips and how many times I've been there. And it will be just as important to maintain the ability to react with speed to innovations and technologies. They may not be used in the same ways they're being used today, but how important do you think it will be to have some sort of U.S. presence in Ukraine if there is any kind of deal reached?
That's a great question. I read guys like Ralph Goff and Glenn Korn, who are much better informed on sort of what Russia wants. In my opinion, I think we have a sort of a very difficult situation for Ukraine. I think Ukraine prizes its people, and they have limited resources, whereas Russia has a much bigger pool of resources, and I don't think that Vladimir cares a whole lot about his soldiers. And so that puts Ukraine at a distinct disadvantage. Russia, I think, is not going to stop no matter what happens. I think that they want all of Ukraine as a buffer against NATO, and I think that even if there is some sort of ceasefire, that Putin will orchestrate some sort of violation of the ceasefire in order to justify him continuing aggressive action against Ukraine. I don't think that there's going to be any stability there until Russia controls all of Ukraine. I think that's his ultimate goal, and I don't think he'll stop until that happens. One way or another. Again, not a Russia expert. I'm not the most informed person in the world on that. But when I look at the indicators that I see from Russia right now, that's sort of my assessment of what that looks like. No matter what the deal is, I think that Putin wants to control all of Ukraine, and I don't think he'll stop until he does that.
Yeah. Joey, once again, your article is published in the Cipher Brief, and if anyone hasn't read it yet, really encourage you to go and read it. It's a very thoughtfully written piece focused on the reality of the technological advantage and where we think there might be advantage, but there actually isn't one because people are innovating so quickly on both sides. But Joey, as we sort of close out our conversation here, I want to ask you about, once again, the future of war. What do you think the most critical components will be in terms of the U.S.'s ability to stay competitive with what Russia and thereby China are learning from what's happening on the battlefield today?
I think there's a couple really. The three that I pointed out in my article, I think are the key components. The main one being the amount of data that commanders are going to have at their disposal, and being able to process that data and turn it into knowledge is to enable them to conduct decisive actions that are nested with a broader strategy for obtaining whatever it is we're trying to obtain in future conflicts. I think I pointed out a 60 times increase in the amount of surveillance and reconnaissance assets, or potential surveillance and reconnaissance assets out there, drone technology that's in the battle space right now. If you think about 60 times more information and better sensors, that is a flood of information that no one is really well equipped to handle right now. I think the sensors, the information, the technology is in place. The Ukrainians are doing a phenomenal job with what they have and what they think is right. I think that sophisticated countries, sophisticated military services are going to do a much better job because of the gains that Ukraine has made, and because of the technological leaps that they've made during this unfortunate conflict. And we're learning on their shoulders right now. So I think really the information process and turning that data into knowledge that enables a commander to make more timely decisions and better decisions that are nested with a strategy are going to be the number one advantage.
Joey Gagnard, retired U.S. military. I'm proud to say a Cipher Brief expert, and And you're launching your own consulting firm now too. You're doing what many experts like you who have just incredible areas of subject matter expertise, bringing that available. Where do we find out more about that?
That's a great question. So I literally spent all night up, working on a website and tweaking exactly what I want on that. It's called Atlas Special Projects. So I'm hoping to bring some of the capabilities and expertise that I developed over 3 decades of service to bear to help people achieve some of their business objectives, and hopefully nest some of the business capabilities, some of the commercial capabilities that we have, in some of our longer term strategic goals as well. So. Thank you very much for the opportunity to sort of talk about that.
No pressure on getting that website done, Joey.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Just honestly for being here, for your service over 3 decades, clearly. But for the fact that, in retirement, you are going just as hard as you were when you were still in the military, especially on this technology side, when it comes to really needing all the expertise we can get. And you certainly have it in spades. So thank you so much for being here with us and chatting about it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a great opportunity.